Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining me for this webinar. It is on about the written statement for the Dietetics program. My name is Rob Kim. I am the LFS Career Strategist. I really appreciate all of you zooming in, joining me on this webinar. It is, noon on December 22nd, and I recognize that, again, some of you are still writing exams or just wrapping up. And so that the fact that you chose to be here with me for the next hour, kudos to you, because I don't know how some of you have the energy to do this sort of thing. But what we're going to do in this session is we're going to go over the written statement. We're going to talk about a couple strategies. I want to just share and acknowledge that I think this session is going to be a little bit more brainstorming and maybe a little bit more talking, because we're not necessarily going to do a lot of writing together in the 50 minutes, but I do want to give you some ideas of what you can do, how you can approach a written statement, what things you might want to consider. So I do recognize that this will be a little bit maybe more lecture heavy than my resume one that I did the other day. And I'm going to share a bunch of resources with you, though, that the goal here is just helping you kind of figure out some different ways to mine your story, to think about some considerations, and to really actually be excited to share your story. I think it's really hard sometimes at this point when you're thinking about your application. I've met hundreds and hundreds of you. I've been doing this. I think this is going to be my fourth iteration. And so I've seen a lot of different things. And I recognize, again, the themes that come up for most people around the written statements, usually something like, I don't know my story, or I don't know what to do, or I'm not sure how to make this interesting. And these are all real things that you're holding. And I know that in this session, we're going to allow you to, the goal is to leave here today feeling, okay, this is one thing I can try, then one thing I can practice. And when I really mean try today, it's the writing. It's about getting your pen on paper or typing, not thinking and just writing. That's the hardest thing, though. All right. So let's go right away. I'm going to share something in the chat. I'm going to put it in the chat there. If someone sees someone join and asks for the link, if you could put this in there for me later too. If I sometimes I won't see the chat. I'm glancing to the side. I have two screens, so I might not see that. So if you want to open that document up, and I'm going to share my screen with you and just allow you to work with me through here. And again, there's going to be lots of ideas that I'm going to be talking about. And so I recognize we only have an hour here together, that it will move pretty fast. So you'll be able to come back to this document or come back when you need some more ideas down the road. Give me one more second. I do want to acknowledge that we're on the traditional and ancestral and unceded territory of the Musqueam people. I am here actually at UBC looking out the window to a winter wonderland. I know the temperature here has been pretty tough. And again, I hope wherever you're joining in from, you're cozy, you're safe, and you're hopefully starting to relax a little bit. Why I'm again appreciative that you're here. You're trying to, again, figure out a little bit of your story and asking yourself, what are some different techniques and strategies that I can do? So let's start. Okay, this document, if you want to navigate a little bit, what I would do right now, and again, for some of you joining, I'm just going to put this document that you're seeing in the chat. What I would do right now is, at the end, you can do a save or make a copy. So make sure you can have a copy for yourself. There's a document outline here on the side, and that allows you to kind of jump around a little bit. And again, we're going to have some ideas. There are going to be some green spaces for you to join in and type. I really want to push all of you today to actually type in there. That keeps you a little bit more engaged than just listening. And I've just brought together a bunch of resources already. The written statement template, everyone, I want you to make sure you see that, you recognize it early and often. This is new this year. And so this is the written statement that you're literally going to be using to type into there. And there's the applicant package information. This is something I would refer to every now and then, periodically, in my personal process, I would actually probably write out post-its to make sure I'm clear about the things that I'm trying to address. We'll talk a little bit more about that. So that's kind of the applicant guide there. And again, the last thing you want to make sure you're not doing is like not hitting some of these things in terms of like the margins and some of the things that they're asking. So written statement here is again making sure you're breaking down this or returning and revisiting and saying, am I doing this? Have I addressed some of the things here? The next one is the Dietetics program required skills and abilities. This is something that, again, you want to take a look at. And specifically for today's session, I think here are some great buckets. Notice they get very specific in there, helpful for your resume, of course. But the preamble here is something that I looked at myself and thought, okay, how am I addressing some of the things maybe in this first paragraph? Last couple things, the YouTube career webinar playlist. If you look at last year's 2021, it does talk about cover letter. They changed it to written statement. In my estimation, when I look at it, it's actually pretty much the same idea, because most of the advising that I did in consulting with people's cover letter was acting like a written statement. It's not like your typical, maybe traditional cover letter when you're applying for jobs. It's really, again, talking about your story, how you're fit for the program. So you can take why I'm highlighting that one is in the webinar description, you will see another Google Doc that has a lot more ideas. I'm not bringing as many of those ideas into this webinar today. It's more about the writing, but if you need some different approaches, you can open that up. And then this document links to the yesterday's resume webinar resource. It's a Google Doc there. All right, let's dive into it. I want to hear from you. What are some actions you're taking or have taken towards building your written statement? Find a space somewhere here. I'll take care of the first one for all of you attending this webinar, because that to me is very significant. You've decided to dedicate at least an hour of yourself. So I'll take care of the plus one there. There's 17 of you right now. Again, find a space. You might have to battle a little bit with people. That's okay. I always enjoy seeing some of the things that you're already starting to do. You're not sure where this document is? I dropped it in the chat one more time for any of you late joiners. Whoever just joined, we're just working on this document here. I'm going to put it in the chat there. You're just in time. Come on in. And I know some of you are writing. I'm going to start just reading out some of these things. Yeah, looking at the required skills and abilities, brainstorming things to include. Yeah, I'd be into kind of a heavy brainstorming phase. And I want to acknowledge that this workshop, some of you are going to be at different stages. It is going to be primarily at the ideation brainstorming phase. Time to reflect on past experiences. Yeah, working on my resume. Great. Some brainstorming again, writing out traits, yeah, obtained from experiences, looking for opportunities to improve resume, drafting bullet points. Great. The reason why I do this question in every one of my webinars is twofold. Number one, it's idea generating, but the real issue here is thinking about recognizing, hey, like you don't have maybe the written statement yet, or you have a draft of it. Look at all these things that you're doing. In my mind, I can't think of a time where I've been as proactive as so many of you are in the dietetics application process. Like we're talking a month ahead of when this thing is due. You're already working on thinking about your package. And I think that needs to be celebrated, because otherwise you're going to start going into, oh my goodness, what am I doing? I'm not doing enough. Like it's too easy to do that, everyone. I am very impressed with all of you. Again, that you're joining me, you're choosing to join me again at a period of time and rest for yourselves. And so this is a thing that I will do for myself when I start writing. I will write down a few things to acknowledge, hey, I might feel a little bit anxious, but I am actually doing things. And this is a recognition of that. I want to also be fully transparent with all of you. I have looked at the Dietetics application process a lot. It's changed a little bit each year, but I want to share that everything in this session is my personal perspective as a career educator. I'm not involved in terms of like with the UBC Dietetics team and their program. I purposely try to know as less as a little as I can about the actual back end. And this is just, again, my perspective, someone who's been involved supporting hundreds and hundreds of you through this process. And so I just want to be clear around that. Okay. The agenda today, it's based on the 4A's. I use 4A's in the resume workshop. I'm going to use 4A's again with a little bit of a tweak. We're going to talk about attitude, audience, action, and then assemble. So let's get rid of the first two real quick here. I already referred to the attitude. Part of this is I'm being specific and recognizing, look at what I've done, right? I've attended an hour webinar. Like that to me is not insignificant. That is you taking action, right? The other things I will sometimes do is I will sometimes, personally for me, I struggle a lot when I need to talk about myself or need to acknowledge things. I have a difficulty telling my story without feeling like, oh, am I bragging? Or is this just too much? Is this too cheesy? These are all real things that I battle with. And I think these are the things that a lot of you will also, be challenged with. So you can answer either question, whatever you want. But really, I want to ask all of you, what are statements you can use to remind yourself about your story, right? What are those things that, whether it's a positive statement, it's something maybe similar you use when you're thinking about like just before you write your final exam, or what is it that you need in order to start writing your story? So like, before you launch into like even brainstorming, what are the things that you need that might set you up for success or get you in the right frame of mind? We're talking about attitude here. So everyone, give me some ideas here or things that you've done in the past. Yeah, look how far you come. I love that. For some of you, if you don't use any of these techniques, that's fine. But again, I always look at what can I do differently. It might be something like, hey, maybe I'll try this out. And, you need to try it out a few times before you reject it. But this is like, basically, we're trying to do some positive self-talk here. Yeah, time to reflect on the topic and collect notes. I like that. Remember your audience. Great. Reflect on experiences where you've learned something new and important lesson. I like that. Oh, I like the statement. I have unique experiences that can set me apart. I have to do that all the time. Remember why you got started. Yeah, why you got started. Sometimes we forget about it because we've been in it, right? Or you've been working so hard to get here. Confidence. Now, that is huge. Yeah, you do need this confidence. And so for me, how I articulate that is through writing again, right? It is confidence. And it's also maybe even framing it sometimes of like, I know I'm starting to figure out my story, or I'm trying to uncover it. Encouragement, yes. I personally like chocolate chip cookies to encourage myself. All right. I'm a really big believer in attitude, and I really think that part of it is, there's a difference when I'm writing about my story. I can be frustrated or like challenged while I'm trying to write about my story because I'm trying to more think about the angle, the audience, the choice of words, all that. Like that is a frustration of actually the process. To me, that is very different than sometimes being frustrated of like, or feeling more like I have to do this, right? And this is what we've sometimes done with our essays and projects, right? Is like, I've done it too, where I get in the trap where if I go to this emissions thing, I'm like, I just need to fill this page, right? I need to get this done. And so I'm really trying to be attentive with this written statement, because I really believe that if I'm not approaching writing my story with some joy, some eagerness, some positivity, I really believe, like, if I'm not excited writing my story, who's going to be excited to read it? So this is, again, part of my attitude, that positive mindset that some of you are referring to, right? So I really want to make sure that I'm trying to be more like, even though I'm frustrated about, like, okay, I haven't figured out my story, I can still be joyful or excited to be trying to figure it out. That to me is a little bit of a distinction. I'm going to just share again for me some positive frame or reframes I like to do. And these are things that I work with lots of people when they come in with cover letter, written statement help. I have a unique story to share. I'm proud of the steps I've taken to this point. My job is now to share that journey. Maybe it sounds like I have good experiences, I just haven't practiced writing them out a lot, right? So again, these reframes can help also with when you're doing your resume and your cover letter. I'm going to let you know that it's not your fault sometimes when you feel stuck trying to tell your story, because we don't actually practice a lot in our North American societies. So it's not your fault. Your brain is just like fearful of something new. So I'm just trying to trigger my brain to get to, like, hey, I got to just practice, practice, practice. All right, let's get to audience. I want to ask you, and we're talking in the context of the dietetics application, what are some things you know or think you know about your audience? I'm going to just see what we come up here for a brainstorm. What do we know about our audience? Yeah, they do want a diverse group of individuals. And we actually really know that because they proactively changed the requirements over the years, right? It was only like 2, 3 years ago that you had to have dietetic specific experience, related experience. That is no longer the case. That was a big kind of actually barrier for having a diverse set. They want to pick people think they fit the program the best. Yeah, they want someone with a wide set of skills applicable in a variety of settings. Yeah. They want someone passionate about dietetics. They want people who are able to teach others, professors and academia representatives. Yeah. In terms of like who's on the committee, that's right. They want people with various experiences. It is helpful for me sometimes to really drill down my audience. I could be wrong, but at least it's still helping me find my voice when I'm trying to write a story about myself. Okay. I will even maybe jump to some larger conclusions and stereotypes. I'm just extrapolating. I may be wrong, but I might say things like, there probably have been working professionals. They've probably been dietitians for a while. It's probably going to be a larger female subset. Um, and again, they're going to have a real intimate knowledge of kind of like the dietetics profession. Um, I sometimes will think that they actually probably will have some deep empathy for us because they've went through this process. I do think that, and I think for this, I would assume for this particular committee, they are wanting to hear stories, right? So when we talk about cover letter and resume, sometimes we talk about in careers of this idea of like, is it stories versus stats? And again, I don't want to use stereotypes to say this is for everyone, but it is kind of sometimes a little bit helpful of like choosing a lane or a niche where, like, if I was applying to like, an engineering role, I might be like, well, I think that group is going to more resonate with stats. So my stories and even the resume are going to lean more to stats. In this case, if I were in your shoes, I'm not, I would probably lean towards, well, they already want a written statement. Notice they're talking about they want to hear these things from us. So I would lean into they do want to hear stories. They probably want that story rather than those stats. So that's something I might be thinking about. Okay. So I like to write out a little snapshot. And again, I'm sharing things that I've done specifically, not for you to do it my way, but for you to think about, okay, what could that look like? Or this is what someone does with their process, right? So I will actually have that audience snapshot. I love using Post-its. I actually have a bunch around my monitor right now, as reminders or ways to keep in mind of when I'm writing, because sometimes it's easy to suddenly like be over here, right? So I like to sometimes have a snapshot of my audience. That is helpful, but not always needed. All right, let's go with this, everyone. Part of the audience, if I drill down, this is from the document, right? Because it talks about one thing that stands out for me in the application. It says, prepare a written statement that describes the following: why you're applying to the program, the why, right? But then also it says consider. Doesn't mean you have to, but it does say consider the program's mission, vision, values, and learning objectives in your response. So if I go into a little bit more of the program overview, I could drill down even more if I wanted to. If I want to go integrated competencies for dietetic education, at some point, I don't want to drill down too much. It just depends on where I'm at. But for me, I pulled this paragraph. And what's standing out to me here is, look, they're talking about equity, diversity, inclusion. And they're relating it to the vision of inspiring learners to advance dietetic practice and food systems. And then the core values of justice, integrity, inclusion, collaboration, and community focus, right? So right there, those values, if I can maybe find an alignment, or maybe I can use that thematically for my written statement, and that's also going to maybe help have give an umbrella to my resume, that's not a bad idea. So again, this is part of my audience. So I might even go back into here where we talk about the audience, and I would just maybe specify like, hey, the audience, they are looking at these particular things, or they want to sense these values. They want to see evidence maybe of these values. Okay. Now, look at, they also say, remember, so there's this is pulled right from this document, everyone, right? Look at the written statement. It also reminds me why you're applying to the program, right? We talked about the mission, values, what you've done to prepare in order to support your success upon a mission. So notice that's very different. It's saying, hey, who are you? What have you done that's going to allow you to actually succeed? One of the issues, a lot of these programs are worried about is it's not only just accepting people. They want people who are going to thrive or be able to figure things out or be able to have the determination to go through a really kind of intense program, right? When you're doing your 6-1 internship, are you going to be able to figure it out? Are they going to be able to trust that you're going to be a good representative for the faculty, for the program when you're going out into these workplaces, these sort of ideas, right? So again, that's something I want to really think about. How am I explicitly connecting the things I've done and showcasing again how that's going to succeed? Now, I don't need to do that throughout the whole written statement, but that's something I want to maybe say, have I clearly addressed that somewhere, or clearly connecting to that? Not implicitly. Look, a lot of written statements when I read are abroad, it's more you're writing all these great things or things you've done, and implicit in there is all these things. We want to be explicit, okay? And then it says key experiences. Notice not all. And then talks about what's great is a mix of employment, volunteer, or academic. And notice it's and or. And then how they relate to the program's required skills. That's again, these buckets again here. Whoops, sorry, I always miss it. These buckets here, right? Acquiring foundational knowledge, obtaining and interpreting data, integrating knowledge to inform decision-making, developing communication, collaboration skills, incorporating ethical, inclusive attitudes and behavior. So I will sometimes use this to see, okay, what overlaps with some of my key experiences? What are the evidence of that? And again, this is something that I might even do after I fully write a draft, because sometimes it's hard to see that in the moment. So it just depends on your process, all right? There's lots of different ways to write. I'm sharing just one thing that I view. Okay. What do you know about your competition? Okay. I do this exercise not to like scare me, but it's just, again, making me consider what my approach is, how I'm writing about my written statement. So here are some truths, right? all the applicants, they love food, nutrition, health, some version of that. All applicants go to UBC and are in F&H, food, nutrition, health. Actually, that's pretty good when you think about, probably a 20 to 30% success rate. That sounds very low for UBC students, but again, for a professional program, that's quite high. You've eliminated the rest of the world. That's quite good. And then you can think about, again, your competition. Of course, they're eager to get into dietetics. They are passionate. So notice for me, simply just the state that I'm passionate in my written statement, that might not stand out, right? And then we also know that all applicants have relevant experience. They're all involved, and some have some dietetics related experience. All applicants are preparing, working on the applications. In the years that I'm doing this, I rarely meet any student now that is, working on it like a week before. All of you are being very proactive. This is how passionate you are. And then again, all of you have one page to tell your story. I kind of like that as a reminder, like, yeah, we all have that same parameters. You also have 2 pages of your resume to enhance or complement your story as well. So it's not meant to scare you. What it is trying to then really recognize, hey, how can I write something that's unique to me? Unique doesn't mean to be big, everyone, or special, right? Unique doesn't mean I saved the world by giving them a good plant-based diet, right? Unique means it's your lived experiences, that combination, and only you have gone through that. That you all have a unique story, everyone. It's just trying to figure out, what am I going to present about that? And is it the right fit for the audience? And you're not going to know, unfortunately, until, the application goes through. How can I avoid expanding my lines of my resume? That's most people when they first do the first written statement. And I don't mind that first draft. It's really just trying to, and I do it all the time, especially cover. I'm just expanding the lines of my resume and putting it into paragraph form. So just take, like, I say this all the time. If you look at those truths, they're not meant to be limiting. They're actually meant to be freeing for you, because you're like, hey, these are kind of the parameters we're working with, but I can still work within those parameters. It's like a genre. The genre is romantic comedy. All of you are trying to figure out what your unique story is to still tell that story within that genre. That's kind of what we were trying to do with our written statement. The harsh one I use all the time when I'm writing is so what. So I have something written down, I will go, so what? Because if I'm not clear, so does everyone. Everyone else has this too, right? So what? So what? All right. So let's get into some action. We're going to talk some writing processes. Some of you will probably have some already, but I'm going to share 5 different writing frameworks. Really, the tip for today and yesterday is the same in my mind. It's writing, writing, writing. And the written statement, everyone, I want you to let go of a final draft idea. Just write. I don't even care if the paragraphs flow. You're just getting some ideas down until you start seeing things on paper too. You can't sometimes make sense of your story. Some of you might workshop things out. Some of you might make a framework. Better way to do it is figure out, how do you start studying? How do you organize your studying? And just maybe adapt that to the writing process. So let's get into some frameworks, everyone. Number 1, one thing I sometimes want to do is I want to maybe have a foundational piece of my story. Like, who are you? What's your personal brand? What's your persona? And why I'm showcasing this one, I think this also, because I want to double dip. This is what I used yesterday in the resume webinar. I want to be able to use this so I can adapt this persona to help maybe thematically organize both my written statement and the resume. So I might ask, what are my top 5 experiences? What are most important to me? What had the most impact? What's unique about myself? What am I proud of? But then the key here is, those are I. Then I want to start thinking about, okay, what do I need to tweak, or what can I focus on that then matches these connections? And I pulled, again, these connections from the dietetics program. Or if this is too specific, I will maybe look at these things that are written down, 3 to 5 would be good, and then connect them again to my audience, everyone, right? Connecting to what I think they're looking for or what makes sense, connecting it maybe to what the written statement's about. So those are things that I want to do. And this is just idea generating right now. So, I might be like, okay, my career strategist role is number one, and then it goes forth from there. So really, I'm at this level, I'm identifying my experiences, knowing my audience. Okay. Number two, this is my personal favorite, and I've used it in many of your classes. I think I introduced it in LFS 100 and LFS 250, and it's the VSI table. So if you look at everyone, this is the kind of actual PDF version, and this one, I'm just trying to think about the values. Now, listen, I'm thinking about my own values, interests, and even knowledge set or interest. And in this case, because it's dietetics, I might even get very specific. So what I want all of you to do right now is we're just going to brainstorm broadly. You don't have to do every single one, but I do want you to just practice, because then I can give some real-time feedback. What I want you to just practice, like, think about a value that you have or a skill that you have or interest, and just list some down. And then we'll pause, and then I'll talk about what I kind of do with that. So just take a moment to write down something. This is a signal also to, if you are having trouble coming up with any of these, that to me means maybe I need to do more reflection about myself before I start writing, because then I'm not maybe fully equipped and armed with all the things that I could use in my written statement. The interest one thing you could do is, we're talking about the context of dietetics, maybe come up with, like, what's something that you enjoy studying, or what's something that you love about nutrition? What's something that's dietetics related that you've learned or that you've applied, right? So that could also work in that manner. And again, it's okay if it's a jumble in these cells, as long as maybe you take note of some of the things that you're writing for yourself as well. Okay, I'm gonna, because I got to keep it going. You keep on writing, but I'm going to just talk a little bit about the values. Okay. So everyone, I might have something. I'm going to just pick one, like treat everyone with kindness, like a great value. That's something we'd want in the program, right? Now, I have to think about listing some values and thinking about then asking myself, well, how do I enact those values, right? So that might be thinking about a time when someone compliments you with kindness. How do you enact those values? How do you then bring them into your situations, into your workplaces, into your environments, and how will that maybe translate into the program? So I might start thinking about that evidence. The other one is, I might actually start thinking about some of the values that they're talking about and maybe find something that's similar and aligned. And so what I mean by that is, if I go back to here, right? Look at our core values of justice, integrity, inclusion, collaboration, and community. So I might say, well, my kindness is that actually integrity, right? Because there's ways you can have integrity and kindness linked. Or is it actually about inclusion? And how do I do that? Is it actually about collaboration? Like, I'm actually empathetic when I'm collaborating with others? Or is it about community? Notice kindness can be in almost all of those things. It just depends on how you define and explain it. My job is to then take the kindness value and think about how that links maybe to my experiences, but to be explicit of how it does that. So I might, again, I don't know if I'll be able to talk about all of these, but certainly I might now talk about the context of one experience I've done that demonstrates collaboration and showcases how I am kind to others and how that has affected people, how that's created impact, how that's furthered advanced the dietetic practice, or how that's inspired learners. See, I'm just maybe using some of the phrasing, or I'm being explicit. I'm not saying things like I impacted all these people and then let it sit and get them to make those connections. The written statement, everyone, you don't have a lot of space. But also, the way I think about it is you want to be really clear. You want to be clear to the reviewers what you are talking about, what you're addressing. Specificity is a way to be unique. I'm going to say that again. Specificity is a way to be unique. So if you're struggling with, I don't know if I'm unique, specificity addresses, uniqueness. Okay. So that's how notice I generated all these sort of ideas simply from looking at one value. So I might initially, our brain works well in threes, take stock of three values. Let's go to strength and skills. Same thing. Like we can have time management, but again, how does time management connect to those values? How does time management build community? How did it help you build a community? How did it help you include others? These sort of ideas, again, these skills can be connected to some of the programs and also from your experiences. So you might have been like in UBC peer programs, for instance, you ran a workshop that utilized your time management skills. You want to think about, again, how that connects to those values. Sometimes it's just saying like, these are the skills that I'm bringing into, or these are the skills that I want to bring into this profession. Okay. Interest and knowledge, everyone. I might take a risk on this one. I might, for these ones, even draw very specific. Why? Because my audience is also knowledgeable in these things. Now, I got to be careful because if I'm wrong, I could expose myself. But I would even see, like, when we have how to transform norms of nutrition to be more inclusive, I can already see that could be a theme from a written statement, right? But I might even in there pepper in details of how I did that, or be more specific of what I'm talking about in terms of nutrition. Like, that's still very broad. So learning which nutrients, again, which foods, it might even be a specific example, right? So you could say something like, I learned how, vitamin B12 in this food, notice I don't know a lot, right? Helped me help this patient recover from their kidney transplant. And that moment to me realized like the impact of how these micronutrients play such a macro, or they have such a macro effect in people's lives, right? So again, I can use the nuances of these details to help pepper into my written statement there. So at this point, I'm just actually collecting some values, skills, and interests. And that might now turn into this, everyone. I might try to develop a statement about myself. So it might be something like, I like to help people do X by doing Y, resulting in Z. I can use my values here, or my skills, or even my knowledge base. You can also write out what, no, sorry, I was supposed to put write out. Write out what your value statement is. So you're simply taking a combo of your value, skills, and interests and saying, this is who I am. This is what I'm about. And then even though you might not even explicitly use that in your written statement, that can start helping thematically showcase your journey in the written statement, right? If you're talking about empathy, for instance, and you're talking about efficient communication, and you're talking about nutrients benefiting others, like that theme hopefully is lined up or apparent in your written statement. That's one approach. You can also use your Clifton Strengths to do the exact same exercise, right? All I'm trying to do is get some data and start connecting it to maybe a persona or brand. Clifton Strengths helps, right? Remember, if some of you in 250 took that. You can also use the car stories. I linked that back to the resume example. Again, why I'm showcasing that one, but I didn't really want to lead it in this session is because it'd be repetitive. But the car allows you to double dip, right? You're writing out your challenge, action, result stories, and then finding some sort of theme from that, which will then help write your written statement, but then also your resume is matching kind of that idea as well, right? Okay. That's number 2. That was a big one. Number 3 is a kind of like a quicker, like step 1, where I'd say, why are you suitable for the program? I list 3 things. I write an example. I like to help people. Everybody, someone is going to write some version. I would like to help people. That's too broad. So I'll see most people's first draft will be something like, I'm passionate about food, nutrition, and health. I like to help people. Or this dietitian helped me, so now I want to help people. Like, those are all fine. They're broad, but I'm trying to get a little bit more specific. So maybe I say, I like to help people. I want to hear how you like to help people. So in this case, I'm listing 3 ways that you help people. So I tutor others in math. Okay, that's one way, right? Then I might list 3 things. So I'm just drilling down, right? So list 3 ways that distinguish yourself as a tutor. So I tutor others in math, working with immigrant families that have moved to Canada recently. There is a potential value connection, right? Inclusion, right? Community. I'm just going to drill down on these 3. So I go through, like, have one statement, drill down 3, then take another one of the 3, drill down, and I keep drilling down. And then I look at a bunch of these. Notice I'm not judging the quality when I'm writing. I just write it. Then once I have a bunch, then I say, okay, is there a connection? Is there a theme I'm noticing? Or which of these stories are best suited to make my case with the audience? And if I need a reminder, I go back to the audience again, right? Like connections, right? Connection to these buckets, to the values, right? To these things that they're looking for in the written statement. So I like to keep on going back to this. And that's part of my writing process. And all of you do this actually in many ways when you're studying, right? You go back to the learning objectives. You study for a while. Where am I? And you go back to learning objectives. You go back to the syllabus. Same idea. Okay, that's number 3. Number 4, I think this is my favorite version of the written statement. So I'm biased against this. And so maybe you don't want to use this. Why? Because it's probably the one that I'm foisting on all of you when I'm meeting you individually, right? But I really like the how it started, how it's going, because what I do, and this is actually goes for all my workshops, all my keynote speeches, all my presentations, I just obsess about the beginning and ending. I want to think about, what am I doing to hook the reader? It's about engagement. Now, I don't want to be showy and just be flashy for entertainment's sake. It still needs to be in context of the written statement, my journey, but I do want to hook them. I really believe you can hook someone in the beginning, and then people remember endings as well. The middle, then, I really believe writes itself, because if I have a good beginning and an ending, then I can see the through line through the middle. So I for instance, the meme, how it started, how it's going, we're doing that right now for Career Carrots, right? That's not a bad snapshot. It's like, how did you start, or what was your perspective on dietetics, right? To now how it's going. And I think in this case, try to be specific, even if you're not sure how the ending is. So what I mean by that is, most people, and let's go with this. In general, the first draft of most people in cover letters and written statements, it goes something like this. I'm writing to the dietetics. I'm writing to showcase how I'm a good fit for this diet, or I'm passionate about the dietetics program. So some version you're declaring that you're writing. To me, that's a wasted lines, because you don't have many lines, right? And then the ending is usually some version like, I'm excited to be contributing to dietetics, or I can't wait to be part of this program. I can't wait to talk to you. And it's something broad again. So I'm just trying to anticipate that's maybe how my competition is going to write. That doesn't distinguish myself. It's not unique. So I might try to take some specific stabs. And so the ending, why not choose something very specific, right? Saying like, as you can see of this experience A, B, C, this is why I want to work with outgoing patients in renal recovery, because that being able to support people as they come out of these life-changing surgery, altering surgeries, that's something that I really am passionate about, and I can't wait to learn more of how to do that in dietetics or something like that. Not the best example, but you can see I'm trying to be specific. I'm trying to create visuals for the reader. That's engagement. Broad makes them have to spend energy to figure out what you're saying, and they also have to build the image for themselves. Specific means you are creating a little bit of a painting, they fill in the rest, and that can engage the reader. That's what we're trying to do sometimes with when we're talking about stories, right? Just not the details. We're trying to give a little bit of specific details. The hard part is being specific is sometimes we tell too much of our story, or we're very precious to our story. So it's hard to cut things out. Okay. So be specific. Can you connect the beginning and the end? And what is the thread running through your story? Another way you can look at it is what's your evolution, right? If here it is the beginning and here's the ending, and then suddenly, oh, that makes sense how you got there, how it started to how it's going. Or I like to do a callback sometimes where, I started here and then I do a callback, but then it morphs or evolves or surprises them into something else, right? But it kind of makes sense there. Last one is the Simpsons writing method. I'm not going to go over this one. This is just writing. Just write, 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 write. This person says, hey, John Schwartz Welder talks about just writes everything down one night and then comes back to it and just edits it. It's like, hey, this is a lousy script. I just have to work and rewrite it. And I think I want to share all with all of you. Just write. Please do not overthink. We try to get to perfection. Writing, writing, writing is one of the most helpful things you can do for yourself. All right. I'm going to take a pause. We have one last thing here. I'm going to stick around for some other questions as well. I will also show you some more resources, but really the heart of what we just went through is, again, thinking about, I don't care what framework you use. I just care that you're just writing and figuring out your story. That's all you're doing. And you're just brainstorming through that. All right, let's talk about assemble, everyone. You can assemble your ideas and your stories. Again, I do this for my resume as well. I use Excel. That's my preference, but you can write your car stories. You can use PAR, the PAR method, problem, action, result. You can use STAR method. And I don't care what method you use, but you can just start organizing and assembling some rough drafts. Assembling yourself, okay? One helpful thing some of you might want to do is write out the steps of your writing process. This helps your amygdala kind of make sense and not feel as scared of the unknown. I like doing that because then also I just follow it. Also, you might want to ask, how can you leverage your knowledge? And that's knowledge that you learn from experiences, from talking with others, thinking about the research you've done. How can you leverage that maybe and connect it with your experiences into the application? I also sometimes work with people, again, beginning and endings. Maybe could you describe your story using a metaphor analogy? I might take a chance to do that where I could use an actual nutritional related metaphor to frame my story. So I've done that before. That's a little bit trickier. And if you're not comfortable using metaphors in that way, then maybe that's not the way to go. But metaphors are a very powerful way to connect with your reader and it engages them. And then I would even make sure, have I identified the unique parts of my journey? That's where you might have to ask other people, because it's hard for us to see it, what's unique, or we can't see ourselves the same way that others perceive us as well. So that's a little bit of assembly of ourselves. Really, this goes back to confidence too. Now, your written statement. Here's some things that you might want to consider, okay? Assembling your written statement. Does the beginning hook the reader? Right? Number one, is it a hook? Listen, if I see your competition means that it's not the first document and only document they're reading today. Can you imagine if this is the 5th or 6th or 10th written statement they're reading in a row? I want that hook. I want to get them to be excited, or even like, huh, or what is going on, or I want to know more. That's the hook, right? And so sometimes, maybe it's not just starting with, I am passionate about dietetics, right? Like for me, probably in this case, I might use a hook, something like, I don't know. Maybe it's like, the moment I got my narcolepsy diagnosis was the exact moment I knew that I had to go into dietetics, right? Like it's kind of out of the blue, or like you're kind of jumping in midway. I did get diagnosed with narcolepsy. So then I might start connecting that with how I like educating people. My journey quickly changes into how I'm dealing with it, how I'm helping other people. And so that it might be the start. But notice I'm just trying to get something a little bit different, right? The one way you can think about that is, can anyone use this paragraph for their story? So pretend Rob comes and steals your story. Could I just take that paragraph and use it for myself? When you write broadly, a lot of times you're like, yeah. The same thing is, you know, if you're just expanding your resume, the middle section, I think what people do is they take the bullets and just write it in a paragraph form. Another one is the paragraph idea clear? Is it specific? You can do this on your own, everyone. Next time when you have your paragraph, what you do is you say, hey, what are you trying to say? And if you find that you're filling in the details or you got to add more, usually what you're explaining is the thing you should be writing. I find that happens often, okay? The transitions, I can see with a written story, a lot of times the transitions aren't strong because it just goes, I want to get into dietetics. Here's experience 1, experience 2, experience 3. Thank you very much, right? Like it's very abrupt. That is also broad because that means that I could probably mix up the paragraphs and they might read a little weird, but not too weird, right? So again, I want to sometimes almost write myself into like a narrative that's really hard to like get out of if I had to like delete something. That's a way that I might have a thread here, right? Last few. Does a written statement assemble a compelling story that the committee would want to meet me? Sometimes when I'm doing this, I'm like, do they want to interview me? No, notice I'm not even getting in. It's like, we got to meet this person. They're not saying it's good or bad. We just got to meet this person. I go back to intent. What's the intention of each paragraph? So if you're using generally the 5 paragraph, you don't necessarily have to have 5 paragraphs. That's essay kind of general, right? Intro, ending, 3 supporting. You don't have to have that. You could have 4. You could have 3 if you wanted. But again, it's what is the intention of each paragraph? Often we're just kind of filling things up, right? Keep asking, does this make sense? Is this paragraph clear? Notice I asked that question about 3 times in this thing because that's often the sticking point for most people's written statements. And then play the delete distract game. If you delete it, does it lose its meaning? And often, again, if you're writing broad, it kind of is weird, but doesn't actually lose its meaning. That delete game helps a little bit. Remember, your job isn't to tell your entire story, nor your favorite parts of your story, right? Because you can't. You cannot do that when we give you just this page. That's what people struggle with too, right? I have too much to say. Your job is to tell a part of your story that represents who you are and how you'll be a contributor to the dietetics program and field. Now you're like, well, that's so hard. Yes, but it's exactly what you do as a student. You're trying to figure out what they're going to ask you on the final. Your job is not to study everything and regurgitate everything. It's you're figuring out what is most important. What do I anticipate they're going to ask or want to see? And I then need to convey that to the marker. That's literally what you're doing with this process, your story. And I know that you're going to be excited. Hopefully, after this call, you should leave feeling like, hey, I'm really excited to figure out what that is. What is that thread? What is it that got me here? Because you worked really hard to get here. Telling your story to me is actually rewarding yourself for all the hard work you've done to this point. You're encapsulating, and I really guarantee whether you get in or not, we want you to get in. I guarantee that by doing this exercise, you are going to still develop confidence. You're going to see these things and you're going to be able to move forward with these things, even if you don't get into dietetics or even if you have to apply again. I really do believe that. And I see that over and over when I work with people through this process. All right. If you can help me, take a moment. Can you add what's one takeaway from today's session? After I see a bunch of you fill this out, I'm going to share a couple more resources. Then I'm going to stay around for about 5-10 minutes to talk about some of your questions. But again, I just want to thank all of you for coming. And I'm going to stop the recording here because I know I can talk about the resources